Hey guys, this is Hemant. Welcome to this course on RPA using UiPath. Today in this session, we are going to cover Module 1, which is RPA concepts. And as time progresses, we'll be moving along and we in total have 8 modules to cover in the coming time. So like I said, today we'll be covering Module 1, which is RPA concepts. So without wasting any time, let's start with this module and see what are the things that we'll take away from this session once we are done with it. So by the end of the session, you will be able to know the concepts of RPA and also understand how RPA actually works. You'll also be able to learn the RPA development methodologies and how to handle exceptions in RPA. You'll also be able to understand the different type of bots which exist in RPA, and towards the end, you'll also know the various RPA tools which are used to implement this technology and how you can choose a particular tool according to your requirements. Right? So guys, these are the objectives that you'll be taking away from this course. So let's start with the first topic of today's discussion, which is differentiating RPA from automation. So if you actually think about it, RPA and automation are very similar terms, but they differ in a very key role. So to understand this role, let's take an example. Let's take a very simple example of calculating numbers. So earlier, when there were no machines, there were no electronic machines, we used to calculate numbers manually, right? But as time progressed, our calculations became very complex. So it not only took a lot of time, it also involved the probability of having an error, right? So this had to be solved. So in 1966, a company called Texas Instruments, they came up with a handheld pocket calculator. So this was the first time a company had invented a handheld pocket calculator which automated the tasks of calculation. Right? So this made our life easier because we didn't have to do a lot of calculations. That was no more required. There was no more scope of errors because we were using a machine to calculate numbers. But still, if you think about it, we still had to feed in the formulas that we want to calculate inside the calculator. And we as humans, we were still lazy and we thought we still have to do it manually, right? I don't still see the fun in, calculating numbers when I have to feed in a big formula inside a calculator. So this is where you should understand the difference between automation and RPA. So automation is basically when you are inventing a new technology to solve a problem, right? So you invented a calculator to solve the problem of calculation. But when we talk about RPA, it's not the invention of a new technology. You are just removing the human part out of it, right? For example, we still needed a human to operate the calculator. But if I talk about RPA just mimics the human. It is not changing the underlying technology, right? So for me, calculator was an automation process, but RPA was just mimicking the human actions to use the calculator. And this is the basic difference between automation and RPA. So RPA replaces human intervention by leveraging software robots, popularly known as bots, and bots feed these numbers inside the calculator and performs the operation. All right. So this is the difference between RPA, that RPA mimics human action and automation is the process of inventing a new technology to automate your tasks. All right. Now let's take one more example to solidify our thinking about RPA and automation. So let's take the example of a data entry employee. Now the job of a data entry employee was to take data from multiple sources and feed them inside an Excel file. So this is a typical case wherein the process is repetitive, right? The process involves doing the same step every day or for every tasks that are to be done by a user or by a human, right? So over here, an RPA bot can be easily used because the steps are defined. Everything which has to be done is repetitive, right? So in any scenario wherein there are a sequence of steps which have to be done again and again, it can be done by an RPA bot. All right, and that data entry employee which has been replaced by the RPA bot can actually be placed somewhere else where he has to, invent something or where he has to think about creative things, because that is something which robots are not good at. Robots are not good at inventing something new. Robots are not good at thinking of something new. It can only do tasks which we have told them to do using the programming language in whatever they are programmed in, right? Let's take one more example to understand RPA, guys. So let's take the example of Volvo. So Volvo is a very famous company which exists in the automobile industry, and they solved a problem using RPA, invoice processing. Let's see how they did that. So this was the invoice processing framework in the Volvo company. So they had some invoices, say ABC invoices, which used to come to the administrator. The administrator's job was to segregate these invoices based on the departments they belong to, and then they were forwarded to the respective teams who used to process these invoices further. For example, when the invoices came to the workers, they had to read these invoices and maybe punch in the values inside a software. Right, so this was the whole cycle of the invoice processing system in Volvo before automation or before RPA. So what did Volvo do? So basically, like I said, it was a time-consuming task for the administrator to segregate the invoices based on the department, and this had to be automated. Right? It also involved the probability of making mistakes, because when there's a human element involved in solving a problem, you always cannot rely on that human, because humans tend to make mistakes, but a machine does not. Right? So a machine can never be tired. It can do the same work with the same efficiency 24/7. And that is why we leverage the power of machines. Right? So like I said, it was a time consuming task for the admin, and this had to be automated. So what Volvo did was they automated the administrator part of the work. The sole job of administrator was to segregate the invoices based on the department names. So his job was replaced by an automated system. So this automated system basically read the titles of the invoices. So for example, the invoices were coming in by mail, right, by email. So automation system used to read the subject lines, and based on the subject lines, which will have the department name or to which the invoice belongs to, it used to segregate the invoices. So this process became automated, and this was solved using an automation system, but not RPA. But if it's talk about the right hand side, which is the worker side, this could not be automated, because you still needed a human to actually read the PDF and feed those values inside specified software. All right. So the workers part still could not be automated, and hence it was still manual. So came in RPA, guys. Now RPA was replaced by the workers. So the worker part was then replaced by RPA. Now you might be wondering, how can RPA do that, right? So if it is so easy to be done by a machine, why didn't we automate that part? So like I said, invoice processing involved reading of the PDF so that text can be analyzed by a human eye and can be converted into a string, or can be converted to a text and put into the respective software. So later, as the technology evolved, we also came up with this kind of technology in computers, which this technology is known as OCR, which is optical character recognition, which basically can read the image and convert it into a textual format. All right. And this technology, like I said, is called OCR, and RPA, guys, it knows OCR. Now, one more question that might be coming in your mind is that why couldn't, if OCR was invented, why couldn't we use this OCR technology in the automated system? We could use them, or we could use this technology, but the thing is, when you're creating an automated system, like I said, you always have to invent a system, right? So for in this case, the invention would have been in the code part. So in the code part, you would have came up with a code which could have included the OCR library, and using that library you would have automated the task of the workers, which was basically to read the PDF and feed the values inside a specified software. But the thing with RP is there is no coding required, so that is definitely a plus, that there is no coding required, and easily you can implement a technology like OCR, which you might think about it might be so complex. Reading text out from images might involve a lot of code, right? But all of that is accessible to you by a single drag and drop inside RPA. You don't need to write any line of code to implement OCR inside your automation. And that is the power of RPA. That is, anyone, and I literally mean anyone who doesn't even know the T of technology, if he wants to do something inside RPA, he can do it, right? That is the power of RPA. Now, if you compare automation and RPA, automation was only possible in the administrator part, And if you compare it with RPA now, how their system exists when RPA came into the picture, so RPA replaced the workers side, which was basically mimicking the human actions which were done. And the automated system, like I said, was a replacement for the administrator whose sole job was to segregate the invoices. All right. So now I think we have a fair idea of what RPA means. So let me just recap what we just learned. Automation is the invention of a new technology or a new way of solving a problem. But RPA is nothing but mimicking human actions to do that same task as same as a human would have done when he was solving the problem. This is RPA. All right. So expanding RPA or giving a definition to RPA, let's see what RPA actually means. So RPA, like you guys must have guessed, it's an acronym for robotic process automation. So what is robotic? Robotic basically means when a machine mimics human action, right? Process basically means a sequence of steps which lead to a meaningful activity. And automation basically means when a task is done without human intervention. So if you were to combine these three definitions, it means machines which can mimic human actions to perform a sequence of steps which lead to a meaningful activity without human intervention is known as robotic process automation. All right. So this is what RPA is all about, guys. Moving on, let's discuss the benefits of RPA, how you guys can get benefited from using robotic process automation. So RPA basically has 4 or maybe even more benefits, but let's discuss the most important benefits that you can take away by using RPA. So like I said, RPA systems mimic human behavior with no change in the underlying technology. For example, like you saw in the calculator example, you were not making any change to the calculator technology. You were just mimicking human actions by using a technology called RPA, and you could truly automate the process of calculating. All right. So the first advantage is it mimic human actions without changing the underlying technology. The second benefit is it does not integrate with the underlying software. So for example, if on your desktop you want to interact with a particular software, say in that data entry example, you were taking text out of from the PDF and you were maybe storing it inside a SAP software or an ERP kind of system. So you don't need to know the source code of the software with which you're interacting with, or whatever display properties, you don't need to know anything, right? RPA can directly type into those softwares just like a human would have done with the least amount of technicality inside it. All right. So this is again a very good benefit of using RPA. Then also solutions can be developed faster when you're using RPA. So like I said, you don't need to code anything anymore. Complex tasks, complex procedures can be done easily with just a simple drag and drop with RPA. All right, so that is again the reason why solutions can be developed faster when you're using the RPA technology. And in the end, it reduces cost because your RPA can now perform tasks that your human was doing before, right? So basically, if you think about it, if I put it in a very nice way, it can replace the work done by a human, right? So that human can maybe promoted or he can be maybe assigned to some other work where automation and RPA cannot be applied, or maybe the company would not need that person anymore, right? So this reduces cost because you don't have to, if you think from a CEO's perspective, you don't have to pay this RPA bot which is working for you. This RPA bot can actually work 24/7. That means more work in lesser cost. And that is how your cost reduces drastically when you're using RPA technology within your business. All right. Moving ahead, let's see what experts say about RPA. What are the things that the big companies like McKinsey and all are saying about RPA? So knowledge in work automation could have an economic impact of $5 to $7 trillion by the end of year 2025. So this RP technology is so disruptive that it can have $5 to $7 trillion worth of impact by the year 2025 in the IT world. Also, it will touch more than 230 million knowledge workers, that is 9% of the global workforce, once RPA becomes popular in the industry. So the thing to take away from here is that it does not mean that 230 million workers will lose their jobs, right? That is not what I mean. What I mean is the job profiles, the work that you do today might get modified once RPA is implemented in the industry, because then the kind of work that you are doing right now, or a part of your work, will be done by RPA, and hence you will be more free to do some other task which might need your attention, right? So this is what experts have to say about RPA. And with this, I guess you guys can, even you guys can guess how important RPA is going to be in the coming years. So now let's start with the topic which says how RPA works. And for this, we are actually going to see a use case wherein I'll tell you a problem statement. We'll see what all components are required to solve that problem statement. And also, guys, I'm going to show you how an automation actually works when you talk about an automation in the real life world. Right, so we're not going to see how this automation can actually be built. That is something that we're going to do in the later modules. But today I'm going to show you a sample automation in action. All right. So let's see first the problem statement of my use case that I'll be showing you guys. So my use case is that imagine a scenario where you want to get the list of names and prices of a phone of a particular brand from a website. For example, you have Amazon, right? So for example, you want the prices of all the iPhones from Amazon, or you have a website called Flipkart as well. So if you want to know the model and the prices of all the phones that is there on their website, the time to do this would easily be around 1.5 or 2 hours, depending on the brand that you're searching, right? So the task that you would have to do in this particular job would have been to copy the name, paste it inside an Excel file, then copy the price, paste it inside the Excel file, and go ahead with the other products which are listed on their website, right? So this actually is a very tiring task, or is a very boring job if it has to be done by a human. So that is why we want to apply automation to this particular problem. So let's see how we will be automating this process. So first we will be identifying the elements that are the key roles or the key parts of this problem statement, right? So for example, for me, the elements would be the name of the product and the price of the product. So that is what I want to get from this automation, right? After that, we'll be defining a structure, as in we will be defining a structure of maybe the output, how the output will actually be structured before actually putting it inside a result file, right? Once we are done with the structure, this is how my data will be fed in inside the structure. We will create the result file. So we will create the result file where my actual output will be saved whenever I'm done with the automation. And also in the end, once we are done with identifying the elements, we are done with defining the structure, we have also specified the file where the structure will be copied. In the end, we run the automation bot, right? So these are the 4 steps which are done whenever you are doing these kind of problems, right? So let's implement these steps and let's try to understand each of these steps one by one. So the first step was identifying the elements. So, the elements, for identifying the elements, like I said, you would need the name and you would need the price. So these are the elements, these are the things that you have to extract from this automation, and hence they become your elements. So if you have done that, you will move to stage 2, which is defining the structure. So you will decide now how this name and this price is to be combined together so that they make sense, right? So you will be defining structure in this stage. Then comes the stage of creating a result file where your structure will be published, right? So you'll be creating the result file, and towards the end, you will be running the bot which will be doing this task for you. All right. So guys, these are the steps that have to be done. So let me quickly show you how this automation actually works. So let me quickly jump to my UiPath tool. Alright guys, so this is my UiPath tool. Don't worry about what the left side of the tool means, what the right side of the tool means. I'll be explaining you guys everything along the course. But right now I just want to show you how an automation actually works. Alright, so let me select this automation and run it. So once I run this automation, guys, I will be prompted with this screen which is asking me the search term or the phone brand that I want to get the details of, right? For example, I want the details of, say, iPhone. So I'll type in iPhone and I'll click on OK. So this basically will open the e-commerce website with the search term iPhone, and it will be going to each and every page, extracting the information till it has no more results to show. Once it recognizes, okay, this is the end of the page for the product, it will take those inputs, and it has already created a structure around it. Now it will publish it to the result file, and in the end it will end this automation by returning back to the tool. All right, so these are the steps which are done whenever you do any automation. Once the automation ends, your tool screen comes up again. All right, so let's wait for it. All right, so I have returned to my tool screen. Now let me quickly show you the output of this. So I'll open the project file and I will open the CSV which has just been created. And as you can see, the time, it's 1:10 a.m., the date modified, and it's 1:10 a.m. on the right side, if you can see the time. So let me open this file, right? And this is the file, guys. You can easily see that on the left side, you can see all the price or all the names of the products from iPhone that are there on that particular website, that is Flipkart. And on the right side, you can see the price for each and every product. All right. So you have a list of around 49 iPhones that you have extracted in under a minute from a particular website. And if you think about it, that automation took me around 5 minutes to create. All right. So this is how powerful RPA is. So this is also a use case that you'll be creating in the further modules. But for now, let's just let's try to relax and go along with the flow, and let's get our concepts right first, and then we'll move on to the tool to create these kind of automations. All right, so let me come back to my slide. All right, so this was how the use case actually works. So this is how an automation actually works. Whenever any automation that you create, guys, this is the process of running it. You click on your automation and you hit run, and it will run for you. And you can literally do any kind of automation inside UiPath as long as it involves the same sequence of steps to solve that particular problem. All right, so now let's move on to the next topic of today's discussion, which is the kind of workloads which can be handled in RPA. All right, so let's look at the kind of work which can be actually done in RPA whenever you're automating things. So these are the three kind of tasks which can be done in RPA. So the first kind of tasks, like I told you, are called repetitive or rule-based tasks. So repetitive or rule-based tasks basically means whenever you have a sequence of steps that are to be done for each and every iteration. So that means repetitive. Rule-based basically means it follows a set of rules. That again basically means that repetitive steps and everything. So whenever you are following a sequence of steps every time to do a particular task, these are the kind of workloads which can be handled inside RPA. The second kind of workloads which can be handled in RPA are scalable workloads. So whenever you have the task of scaling your machine to handle more load, or scaling it down, or maybe some other task of scalability, these workloads can also be handled inside RPA. The third kind of tasks are learning iteratively, right? So your tool can also learn iteratively, or it can learn recursively as and when it is doing job. So if with every job it improves itself, it gives itself a feedback loop and it improves itself. And the next time you'll be using that tool, it can actually be able to do a better job than the previous job. All right. So this is what learning iteratively means, and these are also the kind of workloads which can be handled inside RPA. Now, these workloads are basically handled by two types of bots. So like I said, we'll be understanding the types of bots. So what are these two bots? Let's understand that, right? But before that, let's understand what are bots. So bots are basically software programs that mimic the behavior of a human, right? So bots, like I said, are if my automation was running right now, the clicking, the extracting information, all of these jobs that are happening background, or whatever you're seeing on the screen is being performed by a software program known as a bot, which is doing nothing but mimicking human actions the way I have told it to, right? Bots also automate routine tasks and they eliminate inefficiencies. Since I told you guys, it's a software program, it's a thing which runs on a machine, and machine never gets tired or they never commit errors. They do exactly as they're told to do, and hence they eliminate the probability of inefficiency in your work environment, right? Now in an RPA, guys, there are essentially two types of bots if you were to understand it. Now these two types of bots are front office robots and back office robots, right? So front office robot or an attended bot basically executes its automation on a user's local machine. When I say that, it basically means an attended bot always needs a human to execute the tasks. You will always need a human to run the automation manually, like I did in the case of my Flipkart example, right? So you will always need the human to execute it, or the other way around could be you will need a human to schedule your execution of your project, right? So there is a human involvement here, and that is the reason it is called an attended bot. And these kind of attended bots are called front office robots because they are used where the humans are sitting or where the humans are working, and that is the reason front office bots are actually run on a user's local machine. Now, if I compare it to back office robots are processes which do not need human intervention or human interaction, right? They can be triggered from a faraway server. For example, sitting on this computer, I can trigger an automation on maybe any computer which is there inside this Edureka's network, right? So in that case, if you think about it, that bot, which is that machine that is having that bot, can be anywhere on the network. It could be here where humans are sitting, or it could be there inside a server room among a lot of other machines, right? And that is the reason it is called a back office robot, because you don't need a human intervention to run this particular process. All right. So these are the two types of bots which exist inside RPA, and we'll be learning a bit in detail about these bots as we move along with these sessions. Now, let's talk about these two bots, the basic properties of these two bots. So if we talk about the first bot, that is the attended bot, let's see what it has to say. So the attended bot is basically used in front-end automations, and it is able to perform repetitive and rule-based tasks that rely on structured data, right? So an attended bot or a front office bot can do all these tasks very easily. The second type of bot, which is the back office bot, is used whenever you require an unattended execution, or processes which are self-triggered by automation robots themselves. So when you need these kind of requirements, you need an unattended bot. Also, it can be accessed remotely via a server. So for example, you're sitting in some other remote location, you don't have to go to the machine to run this automation. You can control this machine's bot by a server or by a computer which you are using from far away. All right. So these are the properties of back office robots. Moving ahead, guys, let's discuss the different examples of the different places where RPA has actually been implemented, right? So if we talk about business processes, so RPA has been implemented in healthcare, it has also been implemented in HR, it has also been implemented in finance, it has also been implemented in banking. If we talk about IT processes, it can be implemented in application releases, it can be implemented in networking, monitoring, logging and troubleshooting, and many more places wherein we have repetitive tasks or wherein the human involvement is not required. Right? So all of these places RPA is and can be implemented. Moving along, now let's discuss the RPA development methodology. So our development methodology is nothing but how can you develop applications, or what is the correct way of developing applications whenever you're using the RPA technology. Now guys, this is a general guideline that one should follow to create applications or create software themselves, and the same methodology works for RPA as well. So let's look at what this methodology is all about. So an RPA project should follow a structured stage-wise implementation. So that is pretty obvious, because whenever you're creating an elaborate project, it requires a structure to be followed. It should follow a stage-wise approach so that the requirement specification and the development phase happens in a very incremental level and also happens according to plan. Right? A typical RPA development methodology, guys, has around 4 distinctive stages. So let's discuss these stages one by one. So the first stage of a development methodology is assess, then we have approve, then design and development, and then implement. So let's discuss each of these stages one by one. So the first stage is assessing the requirements, right? In the first stage, basically you have a set of inputs that are given by your customers, and these customer requests are first created into requirements by first, discussing what things are feasible, what things are not feasible, and then you come up with a list of requirements or a list of specifications, a list of features that you want inside your automation. Once you have this list of features, you get them approved by your customers and by your managers that this is the thing that we have jotted down, these are the things which are possible. And if your customer agrees to it, okay, so these are the things that are majorly stuck in the process, you go ahead and you start designing the architecture and developing the software according to these requirements. All right, so once the design and development stage occurs, or once it has ended, it also involves testing it for different values, or testing it for different inputs to see how the automation is actually behaving. Once you think that your RPA has passed all the barriers, it has passed all the testing phase, you implement it inside a test environment wherein you will ask some more people to actually work on it and see if it is working fine. You get iterations, you implement those changes, and hence you move forth. All right. So guys, this is a typical development methodology, which is not only true for RPA, it could be true for any softwares or any kind of work that needs building, right? So anything which needs building has to have a development methodology, and software methodology is the same, and RPA follows the same methodology for developing applications for itself as well. Now moving on guys, let's see how to handle exceptions which are encountered in RPA. Right now, exceptions arise when you are dealing with a software program, and these should be handled properly. What basically this line means is that whenever you are executing a program, it might have some errors, and if it is having an error, it should never lead to the unresponsive side of your automation. So if your automation is running fine and one fine day, the thing or the input that it is working on has changed. Once that changes, the rule-based processes that you have designed according to the input changes, right? So if these kind of situations arise, your software or your automation should not just basically crash and it should not function. It should not happen like that. You should always handle these problems correctly. For example, for this particular example that I gave you, the correct solution would be to maybe inform the user that this is the problem that has occurred, and UiPath Studio will hence be shut down. Right? So this is a way of handling exceptions wherein you give your user an input. Your user is not clueless as to what happened. He can read the message and decide, okay, so this is what has happened to my system. Right? The success of execution handling depends on how well it is implemented during development. So if you're handling exceptions, if your exception handling for creating a project is good, that basically creates a good score for your project as well. So that is how extensive, or that is how better your course can be if you're handling exceptions well whenever you're developing programs or whenever you're developing automations. So if exceptions are left unhandled, like I said, it can lead to a crash to your automation, which does not even sound good, but it also doesn't look good, because that could lead to, even hang the system where it is being run. Right? So it's always important to handle exceptions. It's always important to have backups for your machines, so that if any error happens tomorrow, you always have a duplicate for that, right? The fourth point is it ensures that problems can be automatically resolved. So like I said, they basically help you to recover gracefully from a particular situation whenever an error occurs, right? So this is what exception handling is all about, guys. Now, exceptions can basically be of two types. It can either be a business exception, or it could be a system exception. Let's understand both these kind of exceptions. So the first exception is, like I said, it's business exception. So a business exception occurs whenever an established law or an established rule inside a company gets broken. All right. For example, you think about meeting at 9:30 every day, But suddenly it happened that your CEO said, okay, from now on the meetings will happen at 10:30. Right? So for the people who didn't know about it, they still show up at 9:30, and this hence becomes an exception. This is just an example that I'm giving you. This becomes an anomaly which occurred because of which people came early in office and maybe lost their 1 hour of sleep. Right? So these kind of things are business exceptions. So if you think about it, if let's talk in technical terms, what this exception could be. So like it said, in making business payments online, if an encountered value is above a threshold amount. For example, I've created a program, and now when I was creating a program, my user said that usually at all the times the customer he never pays for more than say around 30 or 40,000 for a particular product. And maybe you revised or maybe you updated your product, and now a product stands at an amount of around 80,000. So if a customer is trying to buy that product worth of 80,000 bucks, and he tries to buy it on the same software in which you program that there will be no prices above 30 or 40,000, it will give you an error. The customer will not be able to buy this particular product because it is functioning the same as if it was doing before, but now the rules of the business or the rules of the organizations have changed, and that has led to the exception in the software. So that is not a problem of the software, that are basically the problem of the rules which have led to that particular software. All right, so these kind of exceptions are called business exceptions. The second type of exception is system exception, which basically arises out of technical errors, such as whenever your applications are not responding or your application suddenly crashes. For all these kind of problems, these exceptions are called system exceptions. All right. So moving on, now we've discussed the exception part now. So guys, these are the kind of exceptions which are there in RPA, and it's very important to actually handle exceptions. And we'll be actually covering how exactly you can handle exceptions when you're creating an automation, when we'll be progressing further in our modules. But for today, I just wanted to give you guys an idea of what an exception is and why it is important to handle an exception. Right? And I guess you guys have a fair idea now that first of all, what are exceptions, what are the different kind of exceptions, and why they should be handled. Because it creates a bad experience for the user, and it also might affect the performance of the system on which it is running. All right, so these are the reasons you handle exceptions. Now moving on to the next part of our session, which is security in RPA. So let's dig a little deeper and understand what are the security aspects that should be covered, or which we should keep in mind whenever we are creating RPA applications. So from the security perspective, guys, the first point, which is about how secure is RPA, let's read the first point, what it says. So configuring business automation carries a risk of exploiting security flaws or committing human errors, right? So this is basically a fact. So nothing is perfect in this world, right? Every piece of software is prone to vulnerabilities, and it is prone to being misused if we give a loop, or if we leave a loophole inside our software product, right? So it is very important to see whether my product is safe, whether my product is secure from being exploited by customers who are trying to gain a profit out of that product, right? So to prevent security flaws, RPA tools provide the means to limit user actions based on roles. Now, there is a thing in RPA known as role-based access, which basically restricts the user interaction based on the privileges that have been given to the user. And based on these privileges, which are dependent on the roles that have been assigned to the user, only a few people can actually access the core part of the software. If not be the case, if everyone had the access of using the core code of your software product, they might make some mistakes and it might lead to some loopholes in the software. So you don't want that, right? And that is why you have role-based access in RPA. What it is exactly, we'll be seeing in a moment. So role-based access allows an organization to maintain access privileges in the team. So, right, so the right person should have the right privileges. He or she should not be able to access higher level privileges that are involved with the software. And also actions by unauthorized roles are restricted. So if a person is trying to access your product and he has not been assigned a role, he becomes unauthorized, and hence he will not be allowed to use any aspect of their product, of the software product that you have designed. right? So this is why security, or this is how secure RPA is. So we discussed something about role-based access. Let me give you an overview of what exactly role-based access is, right? So role-based access basically means that you can create a role for an administrator. The administrator role can have privileges. The administrator role basically can have all the privileges for your software product. And you can assign this administrator role then to different people. Rather than giving different people different privileges, you are giving a role the privileges, and this role can be assigned to multiple people. So this is what role-based access is. For example, now you created an administrator role, and then you think, okay, I need someone who can just see my software activities or see the software processes which are running. So there is a role-based, or you can create a role-based access entity for view access rights as well, wherein the customer or wherein the employee will not only be able to view the software components, and he'll not be able to edit it, or he'll not be able to delete it. So that is also possible using role-based access. All right. So I guess you can get an idea of what basically role-based access is. So let me conclude. Role-based access basically means when you are assigning privileges to a role rather than to a person, and one particular role can be assigned to multiple persons or multiple people that you are trying to give the access to. All right. So now how does role-based access work? I've already explained you this, but let's see what is there in the slide. So role-based access involves a built-in privilege system that can be configured by the administrator. So like I said, if the administrator has all the privileges, he can actually decide how many more roles have to be created. And he can actually give the privileges according to each and every role, right? So now the users will have to log in to actually authenticate themselves. And once they log in, and the RPA system will detect what kind of role is assigned to this particular user, and hence will give the user the access for that particular role. All right. So like I said, if it's a view access role, he will get only the view access. If it's an edit role, he will get the edit access as well. If he's an administrator, he will get all the privileges. So this is how role-based access work. Moving on, guys. So the next topic in security is credential management, which is again a very important aspect of security in RPA. So what is credential management? So credential management basically means you can enter your credentials, or when you can store your credentials inside the RPA or inside any RPA tool, and these credentials are then managed by the tool. So how are they managed? Let's dig a little deeper into that. So Credential Manager is actually a tool which has been provided by Windows, and it basically can encrypt your usernames and password and store it inside them securely. So RPA tools have the extensibility to use Credential Manager, which is a tool by Windows. Right, so whenever you have to pass your credentials to an automation which is being created inside an RPA tool, so the RPA tools actually have the extensions to use credential manager as well. So that also makes the security up for the RPA technology. Also, there is something known as orchestrator credentials. So credentials are stored in encrypted format in server databases. So orchestrator is basically a service which is used in the server client system, right? So you don't have to store your credentials on the client side. What I basically mean by that is wherever your bot is running, wherever your automation is running, it is not important to store your credentials and on each and every bot where the process is happening. You can actually store your credentials at a very central stage that could be your server. You store your credentials only at one place, and wherever the automation has to happen, wherein it will be using the credentials, the server may pass those credentials in a very secure manner. It may use those credentials in a very temporary fashion and might delete them once that automation has finished. Right? So in spite of storing your credentials on a large set of machines, you only have to store it once on one server which are controlling those machines, and the server controls the use of those credentials on those machines once you have stored them inside orchestrator credentials. So this is also a very important tool which comes with the tools which implement the RPA technology. Also, the orchestration credential can also be integrated with third-party tools, right? So there are a lot of third-party tools which provide the same properties such as the orchestrator credential, right? For example, CyberArk. So CyberArk is a third-party tool which is used to manage credentials in a server client fashion, right? and it gives a secure way to robots to operate through Windows login credentials. For example, if I have to log into my system, again, the username and the password is not important. It has to be stored on the client side. It can be stored on the server side, and using the third party tool called CyberArk, you can actually pass on those credentials to that client machine and access those credentials. So these credentials will obviously be accessed by the bot, and you can ensure that it is not stored anywhere on that client machine. So which basically takes the security aspect of RPA again a notch higher. Alright, so this is also a feature which is included in the RPA tools, which is very important and very useful. Moving on, so we discussed the general ideas, the general concepts of RPA, right? So let's move on to discuss how this technology, that is RPA, is implemented, right? So this RPA technology can be implemented using a wide variety of tools, and these are the top 5 tools which exist in the market right now. You have Automation Anywhere, you have Blue Prism, you have Work Fusion, then you have Pega, and you have UiPath as well, right? But why we people learning about UiPath is because just not because UiPath gives us a community edition, but if you look at different reports or different researches which have been done on RPA tools, such as a very recent Forrester research, which tells us that UiPath, it gave a score to all the RPA tools, and UiPath stood first in the rating given by Forrester research. And that is the reason that UiPath is majorly adopted by companies, and people are still in the phase of implementing the RPA technologies. And the first tool, or the most famous tool which is out there in the market, is UiPath. Also for you and me guys, it becomes very easy to UiPath, because UiPath, I guess, is the only company out of this lot which is providing community edition, so that people like you and me who are new to the RPA technology can learn this tool and become master in it, right? And also it is a very good option for people who are planning to buy the UiPath tool, but since they need a demo, they can use the community edition. And if they feel they want to implement this tool in their company, they can go ahead and buy a license for this particular tool. All right. But how can you choose a tool from these lists? So like the first thing that I told you guys is the ease of accessibility, how easily available that tool is. That is also a factor. But apart from that, there are a lot of aspects that you have to look into whenever you're choosing a tool, right? If that tool is able to scale your tasks, it could be a good thing. Is it able to handle the analytics part of your project? It could be a good thing. Is how well that tool architectured, or on what technology is it architectured on? That is also a concern whenever you are selecting a tool, which could be for a particular use case. And how majorly can that tool be integrated with other third-party tools? Like in the case of orchestrator credentials, it can be integrated with CyberArk, right? So how well can a tool interact with other tools which are outside of your tool environment? Then how well are the options defined, or how well can you define exceptions inside your tool whenever you're creating a project? What are the configuration features? How much memory or how much CPU is your tool using to basically do automations? That is also a very important characteristic of choosing a tool. Then comes deployment features. For example, if do you have the capability of deploying it on a client machine? Do you have the capability of having both attended and unattended bots in it? That also is a very important feature to look on. Then comes the interface. So how easy is it to access the interface of your tool whenever you're trying to use the tool? How user friendly is it? That also is a very important aspect. Then, like I said, we discussed security aspects. So security is also very important. The technology that it is being implemented on, is it the latest technology? That also is something that you should actually look on, because what is the point in buying a tool which is worth lakhs and millions of dollars, and when you realize that after 2 years or so it will be outdated, right? So you should always choose tools which are based on the latest technologies, which are easy to manage and which have a good documentation, so that there is very minimal effort in training your employees to use that tool, right? If any tool has a good documentation, that actually is a plus point for that tool, because it can then be easily understandable by the people who will be trying to use that tool. All right. So, like I said, the tool that we guys will be learning throughout the course would be UiPath. And the reasons, like I told you guys, is evident that it comes first in the forestry research. It has a community edition which will help us to basically learn the RPA technology. And also, guys, if you think about it, most of the tools that are there in the RPA world are very similar. So if you understand truly what UiPath actually is, it will take just a matter of, say, 2 or 3 years to get acquainted with some other tools such as Automation Anywhere, because essentially all of them are doing the same tasks, but maybe the way of doing those tasks must be different. For example, in case of UiPath, you might have the recorder in the ribbon. In case of Automation Anywhere, you might not have the recording feature in the ribbon. It might be stored somewhere else. It might be accessible from somewhere else, right? So these are the only difference that you might find when you're using different tools in RPA, right? So essentially every tool performs the same kind of job, and they're kind of the same. All right, so that brings us to the end of module one, guys. I hope you guys got a great or a good overview of what RPA technology is. So today we didn't cover much, guys. We just wanted to introduce RPA to you guys. So that is what this module one has been all about. So let's see what all you guys have learned. So I guess you guys are now familiar with the concepts of RPA. You know the working of RPA, how RPA actually works, the RPA development methodology, the handling exceptions part in RPA, the different type of bots which are there inside RPA, and also what are the various tools, the top 5 tools which exist in the market, and how you can choose a good tool for you to use, right? So these are the things that you have learned today, and I'll recommend you guys that you will go through this video again to brush up things on what all you have gathered today. All right. So with that, guys, I'll take a leave from you guys. Thank you guys for attending today's session. I hope you guys learned something new today.